So I have a son who has autism. He's going to be 40 this year. And when he was diagnosed, there was really no information or understanding of autism around. And it took me 2 years to be able to identify a doctor who would be able to diagnose him. Even though I knew that he was different, that he was developing differently, I had no idea what it was. And then even after I got the diagnosis, there was really no information available in the country at all. And, that was the time there was no internet. 40 years ago, there was no internet in the country. And there were no books. There were very few professionals who had even heard the word autism. And those that had, they really knew very little about how to help individuals with autism. So the reason why I founded Action for Autism was really to try and address this vacuum of information. That was one. Number two, in those days when you got a diagnosis for your child, you were usually told that this is a hopeless condition, forget about this kid, go and have another child. And I wanted to get the message across to people that every child can learn. No child is a hopeless case. So that was really one of the driving forces. And the other was that for a very long time, there was this confusion that still exists to a certain extent, that autism and intellectual impairment are more or less the same. There is no difference, but there is a huge difference. And when we do not acknowledge that difference, and when I say there is a difference, it's like saying somebody who's blind is the same as somebody who's deaf, because they both have physical impairment. But that's not the case. They're both completely different, and they both have completely different needs. They both have very different abilities and strengths and challenges. And that's true of people with autism and intellectual impairment. Those who have intellectual impairment, they need to learn in a particular way. They have different kind of strengths. And those who have autism, they learn in a completely different way. They have different strengths, different abilities, different challenges. But this understanding was completely missing. And because it was missing, most kids with autism were not progressing in the way that they could. They were not really achieving their potential. And that was the other reason why I started Action for Autism, to help people achieve their rights by people with autism achieve their rights by achieving their potential. I think one of the biggest challenges was something that I just referred to, the lack of understanding of how autism was completely different. Also, a complete lack of understanding of how autism impacts an individual. Now, this is something that is even now not that prevalent really. People really do not understand how autism impacts an individual, because when you have autism, your understanding of the world is completely different from the non-autistic. Of course, our knowledge has grown enormously in the last 15 years or so through the writings of people with autism, through reading books and blogs and posts and articles written by individuals who are living the experience of having autism. And that is what has really helped us understand that condition. But it is still not, that understanding is still not very widely prevalent. And in 1991, it was that completely not there. People with autism were seen as hopeless kids that you can just forget about and go have another child, that kind of stuff. In addition to that, there was another very big challenge, and that was an unwillingness to listen. Because, after all, I was a parent, right? And it's not that I had a training in working with people with autism, because there were hardly at all any trainings in the world on how to help individuals with autism learn, right? So I was seen as this mother who thinks she knows too much. And I was often told that you're just trying to make autism into a fashionable word. Why I would do that, I have no idea. So these were some of the biggest challenges, this unwillingness to learn. And there was one other very big challenge. There was this belief that autism was something that happened in the West. It was not an Indian condition at all, and we should not waste our time on these people. There are hardly any people with autism. First of all, there are as many people with autism in the country as anywhere else. Just because we do not recognize them, we do not diagnose them, does not mean that they do not exist. At this point, even as I speak, there are more than 10 million people with autism in the country. But more than that, I think I have a problem with the basic premise that there are not enough people with autism in the country to bother with them. I believe if there are even 5 people with the condition, we should be helping them. Just because the numbers are small, we do not discard an entire population. That's my belief, of course. It's the connection. To learn better, of course, a lot of the strategies that I developed and have been developed in other places are very much there. But I think the most important thing that we talked about, and I find it being talked about a lot more now, is this thing of accepting individuals with autism for what they are. Very often, because autism manifests as behaviors that are different from what we consider as normal, we just we negate them and say that this is not acceptable. And I think the most important thing to help people with autism learn better is to accept them for who they are, help them know that they are accepted, that they are not judged for having autism. And I think that is where true learning comes from. So for instance, if I were to be teaching you something and I were to say that, you can't even learn, stop doing that. I don't like you doing that while you're learning. Stop it and just do it like this. I don't like the way you're working. How willing would you be to listen to me versus if I were to say, I understand that you need to fiddle with your pencil a little bit when you're working. That's okay. So long as you do the work. If you want to fiddle, that's fine. I have no issues. But please try and finish the work. The very fact that I've accepted the fact that you need to fiddle with the pencil, and you're probably fiddling because that helps you to think better, you would be far more willing to listen to what I'm saying versus if I started off by judging you and criticizing you for flapping or spinning or looking out of your eyes and say, stop doing that and focus on what I'm saying. Acceptance and taking away judgments is one of the best ways to get others to connect with you. And with people with autism, not wanting to connect is one of the things that keeps them back from learning. If we help them connect, if we help them feel that they're accepted and loved and honored and respected the way they are, they learn far better. And if I would ask what is one of the most important ways for people with autism to learn that we have talked about over the years, I would say this is it. In addition to all the learning and teaching methods that we have developed, worked on, adapted, adjusted, etc. I don't know if I'm not particularly keen on giving advice, but if I had to say anything at all, I would say we judge people a lot based on their color, based on their race, based on their ethnicity, based on their community, based on their religion, based on their ability. We constantly look for things that make some people different from the rest of us. We are constantly looking at what makes one person different from me, and if that person is different, I look down on it. I mean, the whole world is kind of full of people who are judging and negating diversity, judging and negating the other, and constantly finding fault. And especially in this time of this pandemic, this COVID-19 that we are going through, this has, some people have realized that, we don't want to be like that. There are some people in which it's become heightened, and there is hate and meanness all around. But there is a whole lot of people who suddenly realized that that's not what we really want. And that's what I would want to tell young people today. That the world is full of people who are others, who are different. But this diversity is not something to be made fun of, not something to be laughed at, not something to be teased, not something to be hated. This diversity is something that we want to embrace. And if we can embrace this, we would be able to make a far better world, especially when we come out of this terrible, terrible pandemic that we are going through, and when the world is going to be a very difficult time. And at that time, we could either choose to hate and decimate others who we want out of our way, or to open our hearts and be inclusive of diversity.